Level 1. The candidate. You're 24. You graduated from the University of Michigan with a degree in political science and a minor in Farsi you almost dropped twice. You've never held a classified document. You've never been in a room where the stakes were anything other than academic. You applied to the CIA on a Wednesday morning, sitting in the corner of a coffee shop in Ann Arbor. The online portal looked like a government tax form. You uploaded your resume, filled out a background questionnaire, and clicked submit the way you'd submit a library fine. 4 months pass. Nothing. Then an envelope arrives at your apartment. No agency seal. No return address beyond a post office box in McLean, Virginia. The letter invites you to a preliminary assessment in Rosslyn. It does not say for what. You drive to a glass office building that could belong to any mid-size consulting firm. A man in a grey suit checks your ID without speaking. You're placed in a waiting room with 9 other people. Nobody makes eye contact. A potted plant in the corner is the most expressive thing in the room. The assessment spans 2.5 days. A polygraph that leaves you feeling dissected. A psychological battery of 400 questions where some answers feel designed to have no correct response. A panel interview conducted by 2 people who listen the way radiologists look at X-rays, searching for what isn't supposed to be there. One question surfaces later in the quiet of your hotel room. Have you ever placed loyalty to a person above loyalty to a principle? You gave an answer. You're not entirely sure it was the right one. 7 months later, a second letter. You've been conditionally selected for the Directorate of Operations. You'll report to a training facility in Williamsburg, Virginia. You are given no other details about what that means. You tell your mother you've accepted a position with a federal research office, oversees policy work. She sends you a card with a lighthouse on it, something about guiding lights. You pack 2 bags. You drive east. The highway narrows. The trees press in from both sides. Something is already beginning to change in the way you see the road ahead. You just can't name it yet. Level 2. The training. You're 25. The facility doesn't announce itself. A chain link gate, a guard post, gravel roads cutting through Virginia pine. If you didn't know what it was, you might think it was a government conference retreat for mid-level bureaucrats. Your training cohort has 24 people. A former Army Ranger who speaks 3 languages and gives nothing away. A woman who spent 2 years as a forensic accountant in Singapore. A man who was a trauma surgeon in Chicago for a decade before applying. You won't know any of their real names for the first month. You go by Cooper. The curriculum is structured to dismantle the way you naturally move through the world, then rebuild it. Surveillance detection. You learn to read a street the way a composer reads sheet music, all layers at once. Counter-surveillance routes. Dead drops. How to leave a package on a park bench. A chalk mark on a mailbox that means the exchange was clean. How to build and inhabit a cover identity so thoroughly it stops feeling like a performance and starts feeling like a second gravity. The instructors never raise their voices. That is its own kind of message. In week 5, you're given a field exercise. Your cover, a freelance trade journalist named Daniel Harrow, researching logistics networks in the regional port industry. Your target, a retired shipping company manager in a nearby town, no knowledge of the exercise. You sit across from him in a barbecue restaurant for 55 minutes. You buy him a sweet tea. You listen the way you were trained to listen, not for what's being said, but for the gap between what's being said and what's being held back. By the time you leave, you've extracted 2 pieces of personal financial information and the name of a government contact he'd mentioned only once, casually, and clearly assumed you hadn't registered. You drive back. You write the report. You feel something difficult, a feeling you will eventually learn to file rather than carry. One trainee is gone by week 8. Bunk cleared overnight. No announcement. You learn that asking is not something people do here. By the final week of training, you have stopped entering rooms the way civilians enter rooms. You note exits before furniture. You clock the hands of strangers before their faces. You catch yourself timing how long eye contact lasts. You pass. 19 of you remain. You are given your first assignment, Islamabad, Pakistan, under diplomatic cover as a 3rd secretary for consular affairs. You fly west into an eastern morning. Level 3. The case officer. You're 28. You work out of the American Embassy on Diplomatic Enclave Road under a cover that fits, like a tailored suit, visible enough to seem credible, unremarkable enough to invite no interest. Your counterparts in the consular section believe you process visas and manage expatriate paperwork. The senior officers at Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence know differently. They have the professional discipline to pretend otherwise. Your job is to recruit and handle human intelligence sources humans in the language of the building. In practice, that means identifying people with access to things the United States government wants to know. Building a relationship. Making betrayal feel like purpose. By the end of your second year, you have 3 active sources. The first is a junior finance official in the Ministry of Economic Affairs. His motivation is uncomplicated. He has debt, and a second family, his primary family, doesn't know about. He provides budget allocation data, nothing spectacular, but consistent. The second is a Pakistani academic who consults for a Lahore-based think tank with known connections to figures in the tribal belt. His motivation is more layered, a genuine belief that the people he reports on represent a danger to his country, and a taste for the dangerous feeling of doing something about it. The third is a mid-level procurement official who has regular contact with individuals operating within arms acquisition networks. He came to you. That always requires more scrutiny. You meet each of them at rotating locations. A hotel cafe near Jinnah Avenue, a bookshop in F7, the lobby of a private hospital where nobody who knows either of you would have a reason to be. The cables you write travel encrypted to Langley. You don't know what happens after they arrive. You imagine them entering some vast dark current of analysis and emerging, weeks or months later, as fragments inside a briefing that shapes a decision you'll never witness. In your third year, a source you've been cultivating for 6 months, a logistician with peripheral knowledge of cross-border supply networks, stops responding. No contact for 3 weeks. Then, a message through an intermediary. He's done. No reason. You write the termination report. You flag the ambiguity, possible fear, possible external pressure, possible compromise. Your station chief reviews it. He adds a comment in the margin. Assess and move forward. He doesn't explain what that means. You understand that it means exactly what it says. You wonder about that man for years. You never find out what happened to him. This is the thing the training prepares you for intellectually, but cannot prepare you for in the body. The job is mostly silence, where answers should be. Level 4. The Targeting Officer. You're 33. You've come in from the field. You're back in Northern Virginia, inside the original headquarters building at Langley. The marble lobby. The agency seal inlaid in the floor. The memorial wall on the north side, 140 stars carved into white Alabama marble, each one representing an officer killed in service. Some stars have names in the adjacent Book of Honor, some do not. Those are the ones still classified. You count them sometimes when you pass. You've transitioned into targeting the analytic work that happens before a recruitment ever begins. Your job is to study a foreign target, a ministry, a network, a military procurement division, and map its human geography. Who has access to what? Who is financially stretched? Who has been passed over for promotion 3 times in 5 years? Who travels to conferences in cities where American case officers also happen to be? You work in a windowless office. You read signals intelligence, travel manifests, financial records, and cables from stations across the Middle East and South Asia. You build link charts. Visual architectures of human vulnerability. You are, in the formal language of your institution, identifying potential assets. You train yourself not to think too long about what that phrase contains. One targeting package takes you 9 months. A mid-grade official in the foreign ministry of a Southeast Asian country, second-tier access to regional security negotiations. You map his finances, his travel patterns, his family structure, his professional grievances. You write the package. A case officer in the field runs the approach. The recruitment takes 11 days. The field officer later tells you it was one of the cleanest he'd ever worked. You feel a moment of something, then the moment passes. The next package is already on your desk. Headquarters culture is a different friction from the field. In the field, the pressure comes from outside the physical exposure. the performance of a false identity, the weight of operational risk. Here, the pressure is interior. You are surrounded by some of the most analytically capable people you will ever meet, who disagree with each other frequently and express it in layers of bureaucratic language designed to carry weight without leaving fingerprints. A cable comment that reads, "This assessment would benefit from additional sourcing" means, "I believe this is wrong," and the officer who wrote it is overconfident. You learn the language within months. You start writing in it shortly after. Like and subscribe for more amazing stories like this. Level 5, the Chief of Station. You're 40. You're in Nairobi, Kenya. Chief of Station, the senior CIA officer in country, responsible for every collection operation, every liaison relationship, every source and asset operating under your station's authority. You manage a staff of 14. Several operate under non-official cover, no embassy affiliation, no diplomatic protection. If they're caught, the United States government will have no knowledge of their activities. You've signed paperwork that makes that position legally precise. You brief the American ambassador on intelligence matters twice a week. He's a former senator from Georgia, sharper than his glad-handing manner suggests, and careful never to ask questions whose answers would require him to change his posture in a room he'd rather stay comfortable in. You've reached a professional equilibrium. East Africa, in this period, is operationally dense. Al-Shabaab maintains active networks across the Kenya-Somalia border. There are cells in Mombasa. Threat reporting comes in dense and sometimes contradictory, too much signal, not enough clarity. One Tuesday morning, a report comes through a cutout in a third country. A source reliable for 3 years, decorated track record, one previous instance of embellishment you documented and flagged, says an attack against a commercial district in Nairobi is being planned. 30 to 45 days, no specific target identified. Single source, no corroboration. You write the threat assessment. You assess the reporting as credible but unconfirmed. You recommend enhanced surveillance and coordination with the Kenya National Intelligence Service. You do not recommend a public advisory that would burn the source and expose the collection method. 40 days pass. Nothing happens. You will spend a long time not knowing whether nothing happened because the intelligence was accurate and the plot was disrupted, or because the source inflated the threat to remain valuable, or because the timeline simply moved and the threat was real and is still out there, somewhere in the future. You write the follow-up cable with the precision of someone who has learned to document uncertainty without resolving it. You eat dinner alone that night at your residence on Muthaiga Road. You pour 2 fingers of scotch and sit with the particular weight of having made a consequential decision you will never be able to fully evaluate. This, you've come to understand, is the actual center of the work, not the intelligence, not the recruitment. The capacity to act responsibly under conditions that will never offer you the satisfaction of certainty. You develop that capacity the way you develop scar tissue, slowly, under pressure. Level 6. The Senior Intelligence Officer. You're 46. You're back at Langley. Senior Intelligence Officer in the Counter-Terrorism Center, the division that was operationally transformed in the months after the 11th of September, 2001, and has never fully returned to what it was before. You manage a division of 38 analysts and case officers. You review operational proposals. You sit on targeting boards. You write assessments that reach the National Security Council. The pressure at this level has changed in kind, not just degree. It isn't the pressure of personal danger, it's the pressure of consequence. A sentence in the President's daily brief, the classified intelligence summary delivered to the Oval Office each morning, can shape the framing of a foreign policy decision, can influence whether resources move, can contribute to a chain of events that ends with someone's death. You write with the care of someone who understands that. You caveat appropriately. You state confidence levels honestly, even when the policymaker wants certainty you cannot provide, even when providing it would make the meeting easier and your institutional standing more comfortable. One evening, a proposal comes through your division, a facilitator in a terrorism financing network. The intelligence is solid. The target is real. The proposed operation will likely result in either capture or death. You review it across 2 days. You consult 2 senior officers whose judgment you trust. You approve it. You go home. You make pasta. Your son, who is 15 and believes you manage cybersecurity policy for the government, asks you what you're thinking about. You say, work stuff. He goes back to his phone. You think, this is the specific invisibility of it. The enormity exists entirely out of frame. Level 7, the Deputy Director of Operations. You're 53. You are now the Deputy Director for Operations, the head of the National Clandestine Service, the officer responsible for all human intelligence collection and covert action conducted by the Central Intelligence Agency globally. You have equities in more than 90 countries. You brief the director daily. You brief the National Security Advisor weekly. You testify before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence in closed session twice a year, in a room with no windows and a classified transcript. You are responsible for people you have never met, operating in places you've never visited, doing things that will be reduced to a single redacted line in a report that itself may never be declassified. 4 months into your tenure, an operation in the Caucasus region begins showing signs of compromise. A source who has been in place for 9 years suddenly reduces the density of his reporting. Messages grow shorter. The intervals between meetings stretch. The material is thinner. The field assessment. Possible surveillance. Your assessment. Reviewing the same data. Possible controlled contact. The source may be operating under duress. Passing material a hostile service has pre-approved. The distinction is critical. Surveillance means you extract him. Controlled contact means extraction, confirms you know, and burns the detection method. You convene a review panel, 6 senior officers, 72 hours of analysis. The panel splits evenly. You make the call. You leave the source in place for 60 additional days under enhanced scrutiny. On day 53, he executes a pre-arranged distress protocol. You extract him within 36 hours. He's safe. In debriefing, he confirms that the opposing service identified him 8 months earlier and had been running him as a double agent, feeding him fabricated material designed to shape American assessments of a specific regional negotiation. You order a full retrospective review of every cable he ever produced. The review takes 11 months. During those 11 months, you sleep in the way of someone whose sleep has a structural problem nobody can fix. Level 8. The Director of the CIA. You're 58. The President called on a Friday. You were reviewing the week's threat matrix. You stepped into the hallway. She offered you the directorship in 3 sentences. You asked for the weekend to consider it not from uncertainty, but from a belief that the weight of the thing deserved at least 48 hours of honest reckoning. You are confirmed by the Senate, 67 to 33. The building changes when you enter it. Not the building itself, the marble, the wall of stars, the agency seal. None of that moves, but the way the building orients toward you shifts entirely. Every room you enter reconfigures itself. Your day begins at 6:30 a.m. with a threat brief covering every active operational theater, every significant intelligence gap, every development in the overnight reporting cycle. You then carry that briefing to the White House. You sit in rooms where the decisions being made will not be publicly known for decades, if they become known at all. 8 months into your tenure, a sensitive collection program is leaked. Not its existence, its operational architecture. Specific enough that only someone with very narrow access could have provided it. You order an internal counterintelligence investigation. It runs for 11 months. It identifies a likely source. A senior analyst in a signals support division, 15 years with the agency, exemplary record, a person who believed sincerely that the program in question exceeded the legal authorities under which it had been authorized. He is arrested on a Thursday morning. Your general counsel briefs you within the hour. You sit with it. You think about the difference between a person who leaks to damage the institution and a person who leaks because they believe the institution has already damaged something that matters more than itself. The distinction is real. It doesn't change your legal obligation. You authorize the referral. You go back to work. Level 9 after the building. You're 63. You left the directorship in March. A new administration, a different set of priorities, the ordinary mechanics of institutional transition. The handover was professional. 2 weeks of briefings with your successor. Programs, relationships, ongoing sensitivities. A handshake in the 7th floor corridor. You walked out of the building and stood in the parking lot for a moment longer than you intended. The consulting offers arrive within weeks. A defense contractor, a private intelligence firm, a think tank attached to a university in Washington that wants to launch a center on intelligence policy and national security ethics. You take the university position. You teach a seminar 12 graduate students, Tuesday evenings, 3 hours, a room that smells like old carpet and ambition. They are brilliant and earnest, and entirely certain that the architecture of oversight and accountability can be made sound if the right people argue for it clearly enough. They ask you questions you spent 35 years not being permitted to answer. You answer what you legally can. You're more honest in that room than you've been in many rooms with much higher clearances. One student, a young man from Albuquerque, first in his family to attend graduate school, the kind of focused that looks from the outside like calm, asks you in the final session, if you could go back to that coffee shop in Ann Arbor, would you still click submit? You don't answer quickly. You've learned, finally, that quick answers are a habit of people who've never had to live inside the consequences of what they say. You tell him, that's the wrong question to sit with. The right question is whether, at each moment you had a choice, you tried to do it with integrity. I'm still answering that one. He writes it down. You think that might be the most truthful thing you've said in a very long time. Level 10, the record. You're 72. Your name appears in 4 declassified documents released over the past 12 years. In 2 of them, the sections describing your role are redacted in their entirety. In a third, you appear in a footnote referencing a targeting authorization that later produced significant intelligence value. In the 4th, you appear in an internal review examining the handling of a source who did not survive an extraction attempt in 2011. His name remains classified. You know his name. You knew his daughter's name. You knew the color of the jacket he wore the last time you reviewed his security posture and assessed it adequate. You think about him more than you think about any of the programs, the operations, the policy impacts that were, by most institutional measures, the significant achievements of a long career. You think about the specific file review in the winter of 2010. You think about the 2 assumptions you made that turned out to be wrong. You think about whether being careful was the same as being right. You've never been able to make those 2 things cohere. You give a lecture at a foreign policy conference in Denver. The audience is 250 people, academics, former officials, journalists, young people in blazers with notebooks. They've invited you as a figure of public service, a voice on intelligence reform and institutional accountability. You are introduced with 3 paragraphs of accomplishments. You speak for 40 minutes. Afterward, a woman in her late 20s approaches you near the exit. She is composed in the particular way that reads, to people trained to read it, as practiced composure rather than natural ease. She introduces herself, mentions a specific analytical division at a specific address in Virginia. She says she has a few questions about your time in Islamabad, if you have a moment. You say you have a moment. You walk with her to a quieter part of the lobby, away from the departing crowd. The noise drops. You are, both of you, professionals. The institution has a long memory and a longer reach. You knew that when you clicked submit in that coffee shop almost 5 decades ago. You knew it when you drove south through Virginia Pines toward a facility that didn't announce itself. You know it now. Maybe that's what you always wanted, to be held by something larger than what you could hold alone. Or maybe you just never figured out how to want anything else. Either way, you have a moment. You always have a moment. The work, it turns out, doesn't end. It only changes what it asks of you.